Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Uh, nice to meet you, my audience. Now I have an honorable guest, Mr. Miko Pellet, to be honored for us. Mr. Pellet willing to accept our invitation. Thank you for your presence on our channel, Real Thinker Institute, the channel that present and focus on the way of thinking. Mr. Pellet, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Okay, Mr. Miko Peled, we know you, yeah, in Indonesian audience, very familiar with your voice in the late message to our president that not allow Israel football team to play in our homeland. So, and I think
You're
it
breaking
was
up.
it succeed. It succeed. Thank you very much for your advice.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Miko Peled, you know about you. Everybody know about you. But for Indonesian people, let me give an introduction. Among handful of Israel Jews, Miko Peled became a figure who vigorously defend Palestine by calling on the Zionist regime to hand over the West Bank and Gaza Strip entirely to Palestine. He is the son of Matti Peled, one of the top Zionist generals who contribute to the founding of the Jewish state. The reason for his thoughts and movement, which were considered pro-Palestine, he wrote in a book entitled The General's Sons, The Journey of an Israel in Palestine, which was published in the United States in 2012. Okay, Mr. Pellet, direct to our subject. You know that for Palestinian people right now, they don't have or they are not fulfilled, yeah, in the three right of return, right of resistance, and right of determination. Right of return, there are million Palestinians cannot come back to homeland. Right of resistance, they not allowed using weapon to resist Israel regime, and right of the determination. Right now, the Palestinian people cannot establish their own state. What do you think about the three of basic right of Palestinian people?
Yes, well, thank you for having me on your program. I know it's always a pleasure to speak to people in Indonesia. Like you said, I've had some experience people with the campaigns for Palestine in Indonesia, and it's always an honor and a pleasure. I just want to correct you one thing. My stance is not about the Palestinians establishing a state in the West Bank and Gaza. My stance is that all of historic Palestine should be liberated and become a free democratic Palestine, not only the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which are only 22% of historic Palestine, but the entire country of Palestine, which is now called Israel. And so what I call is for the liberation of all of Palestine from the Israeli apartheid regime and the creation of a democratic, free Palestine. But you're right, Palestinians are denied these three rights. They are denied, millions of Palestinian refugees are denied the right to return. And not only that, but now the UN agency that takes care of the refugees, UNRWA, is being denied funding. And this is something that the Israelis have been working very hard for because they want to pretend that that problem doesn't exist, that there are no refugees. So that is a very big problem. Not are they not only allowed to return, but nobody takes the trouble to take care of them. And we're talking about millions of people living in horrific conditions, in horrific camps, and who have the absolute right to return. They do not have a right to resist, of course not. When Palestinians resist, they're called terrorists. But not only do they not have a right to resist militarily, they have no right to resist peacefully either. You know, Israeli prisons are full of Palestinian political prisoners who never in their life picked up a gun, who never in their life intended to hurt anybody physically, but were involved in civil disobedience and peaceful resistance. And the vast majority of Palestinian resistance has been unarmed, peaceful resistance, and still they are always met with enormous amounts of violence. I've had a lot of experience seeing that and being part of that. And then the right to self-determination, Israel actually passed a law a couple of years ago called the nation-state law. And according to this law, only Jewish people have a right to self-determination in Palestine, which is, of course, absurd because the Palestinians are the nation of Palestine. The Israeli Jews like myself are immigrants, colonizers, settlers. And this is a very problem. These three issues are precisely the three things that Palestinians are denied.
Okay, Mr. Peled, let our clear your powerful statement about entire of Palestine land. Do you mean that you choose just one solution, one state solution or two state solution? Give your
There is no such thing as two-state solution. Two-state solution is a myth. It's a myth. The option is a one-state apartheid racist state of Israel or a one-state free democratic Palestine. The two-state solution is a myth. It's a myth that Israel plays with and people who support Israel play with because it allows them to never reach any solution. So that should be thrown into the garbage can. The only options are what we have today, which is a racist, violent, apartheid state of Israel, or a free democratic Palestine for which we have to fight and for which we have to stand up and for which people in Indonesia have been standing up, thankfully, and very few other.
Do you mean that, sorry, Mr. Peled, do you mean that one state solution, it's mean that we deny the fact, the struggling of the Jews coming back to build one state solution for the Jews, meaning that they are destroyed, they're fighting, they legitimate with the force. It is a struggle for them.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you mean that one state solution denying the history of struggling in the side of Israeli because they think that they struggle, okay?
They didn't struggle. The Zionists came, the Jewish settlers, the Zionists who came to Palestine stole a country. They stole a country and kicked out the people. There is no history of Israel and Palestine, and so what's important is to realize that there's no legitimacy, historic or otherwise, to a state for Jewish people in an Arab country, which is what Palestine is, an Arab country, a majority Muslim country. They came with weapons, they stole the country, and they kicked out the Palestinians. So there is no.
Okay, let's make clear. Democratic state, meaning that in one state, there are two citizens, Israeli and Palestine, or just Palestine.
No, Israelis, of course. I mean, today almost half the population are Israelis. Palestinians are the majority, but but by very little. So, of course, Israelis and Palestinians living as citizens of one country, of one state, but equally, one person, one vote, the same rights.
Do you agree? Do you agree with the referendum?
No.
Why?
Not a referendum.
By using what? By using what become sorry, by using procedural democracy, meaning that using referendum, to make sure that between Palestine and Israel have an equal right.
The reason a referendum is not a good idea is because the two sides are not equal in anything. Today you have an Israeli Jewish minority ruling over a Palestinian Arab majority. They have all the resources, they have all the access to water, to land, to military power, to policing, to intelligence, and so on and so on. What needs to happen is a dismantling of the apartheid state, like was done in South Africa, a complete dismantling of the apartheid state, and a one person, one vote democracy where everybody gets to vote equally. And then once you have a legislature, a parliament, if you will, that represents all the people, and you have an executive branch, a government that represents all the people, then you can start building a constitution. Then you can put in mechanisms to allow the refugees to return. Then you can start compensating Palestinians for the land. Then you can decide what is a citizen and what is citizenship. Right now, to be a citizen, you have to be Jewish. So the dismantling of the racist regime has to come first, and the creation of a real democratic state with real democratic institutions. That is where the level field, for the first time, the playing field is leveled. And then we can start working and figuring out all the other aspects of the state.
Okay, but to see the fact, Mr. Miko Peled, to see the fact that you are inside in Israel and also citizen of America, citizen United States, is it right? So
Yes.
you inside of Palestine, we don't know. We are outside of Palestine, so we see from the outside perspective. So do you think that I ask you, do you optimistic with the Jews that they have a right, to make the state special for the Jews, because it is kind of ideological root from the grassroots of the Israeli. How
There
can you make sure?
is no such thing as the right of Jewish people to Palestine. There's no such thing. This is an invention by the Zionists, Christian Zionists, by the way, and Jewish Zionists. So there is no such thing. Like I said, settler colonialism, racism, apartheid, these do not, and military power do not grant people a right. If they had a right, they wouldn't have to use these. And the reality is that there's so much mythology that has been inserted into this conversation that people very often don't know how to differentiate between the mythology and the history and what is actually taking place. Now, the book you mentioned that I wrote, it's right behind me, The General Son, is the way I discovered, as the son of an Israeli general, as the grandson of Zionists and so on, very, very strong Zionist, patriotic Israeli upbringing. And I felt very strongly about it. I took this journey and I learned on my own, by my own, with my own experience, how to negotiate these two narratives, how to bridge these two narratives. And the truth is, these two narratives are so far apart that you can't bridge them. One says it's day, one says it's night. So through my experience, through my travels, through my conversations, through my, I was able to find out what is actually taking place, who has the right, who doesn't have the right, who has the power, who doesn't have the power, and what I believe. And at the end of the book, I mentioned what I believe is the one just and realistic solution to the issue of Palestine. So that's why I tell people, if it's a guidebook. My book, it's a memoir, but it's a guidebook, how to weave through this issue that seems complicated to some people and who are struggling with this issue, who don't know which side they come on. This book provides that pathway, if you will, to understanding this issue, and in my opinion, coming out with the right conclusion.
I have ever news. This is a kind of opinion that actually, since the beginning of Israel was birthed, actually the Jews doesn't agree about the state of Israel, because it is a kind of British project. What is your comment?
Well, it is a British project. It's a joint project of European British Zionists and European Jewish Zionists. There is a segment of Jewish communities, the very ultra Orthodox communities, who reject Israel completely. These are the Jews that have the long beards and are traditionally the most observant Jews. They oppose the idea of a Jewish state completely. They many of them stand up and support the Palestinian cause 100%. But that's a whole other story. I'm actually writing a book about that. But the majority of Jews never came to live in Palestine, never came to Israel. The majority, even after the Holocaust, the vast majority of Holocaust survivors, the vast majority did not go. Only a very small percentage of Holocaust survivors after the genocide of the Jews, those who survived the genocide of the Jews in Europe by the Nazis, very small percentage, less than 10%, actually went to what became Israel, and many of them left because they couldn't take it, because it was racist and militaristic and violent. So Jewish people, this idea that Israel is the state of the Jewish people is complete nonsense. It's the state of people who prescribe to a racist, violent ideology, which is called Zionism.
And there is no logic at all. Became a victim of Nazi, and to put the state in Palestine land. See, right? It's not logic at all. There's no
No,
correlation.
of course, it makes no sense at all. But what they do is they say, well, because of the Holocaust, the Jews should have a state in Palestine. But the thing is, you're right. It doesn't make sense if you have just experienced racism and violence and the supremacist ideology to take the racism, the violence, and the supremacist ideology to another country and impose it on other people. Of course not. If we want to eliminate racism, we have to educate people to be humans, to see other people. We have to educate to tolerance, not to militarism, not to give young people a gun. Go kill those people. They are your enemy. That doesn't make any sense. That's what they did.
Yes,
and
yes, yes. Are you trying to say that it is more propaganda than the real come from the heart of Jews?
Yes, that's propaganda. Absolutely.
Okay, another my question, Mr. Miko. Do you give a comment or good comment for three basic of Palestinian people: right of return, right of resistance, and right of determination. But the most very difficult to fulfill is the right of determination. But how to make it is fulfilled? It is right of determination, because from the two perspective, right of return, it is impossible. United Nations, superpower of United States, England, and Europe inside of Israel, and right of residence also, like in the lately that very pro-Palestine, we call it Iran, maybe support with the weapon, but it's become a target of a sanction. It is very difficult. I just want to say it is very difficult to give a status state for Palestine. So from this real fact, what is the main strategy to fulfill the basic need, basic right for Palestine, right of determination?
Well, that's a very good question. And the problem is, of course, today there is no strategy because Palestine has no parents. The Palestine is orphaned. There is no parent, there is no organization, there is no body that represents Palestinian issues, the Palestinian interests, or the Palestinian rights. No one is fighting for it today. Israel has dismantled it, and there are voices speaking about it. Now, you referred earlier in your introduction about the campaign, the campaign against allowing the Israeli football team to come to Indonesia. So it's true that in the end they did not come, but Indonesia paid a price when they took the tournament out of Indonesia, which was wrong of FIFA to do. I think the campaign, if the campaign was really successful, and basically what happened was Indonesians lost. And I'm sure many Indonesians were very angry that they lost opportunity to see great football. They saw opportunity to see their team. They lost business opportunities. The responsibility for disallowing an Israeli team shouldn't be on the country that's hosting. It shouldn't be up to Indonesians. FIFA needs to boycott Israel completely because it's an apartheid state, and Amnesty International has a document that shows it's an apartheid state. If the campaign, I think, a real successful campaign, the entire Indonesian people and would have been standing behind it. And I think that the Indonesian government would have had an easier time standing behind it. But we don't have the ability to provide the information. One of the things I said in the videos that I posted at the time was, fine, if you want to allow the Israeli team to play football in Indonesia, you should also invite thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, soccer players, football players, whose legs were amputated because Israeli soldiers targeted them. Then you will have a fair playing field because they will see exactly what happened and why are we opposing this? Why are we boycotting Israel? Why is it wrong to invite an Israeli football team? These were all soldiers. These were, in Palestine, young people cannot play football because they were shot in the knees by snipers and their legs were amputated on purpose as a policy. So I think a more successful campaign would have had a much larger backing. And also at the end, FIFA would not have taken the tournament out of Indonesia. Indonesia should have been allowed to host this, and Israel should not have been allowed to participate. So what I'm saying is the problem is that there is no strategy. Something happens and we respond. Of course, people in Indonesia responded very well, I think. But there's no strategy moving forward. We're always responding to something that is happening, as opposed to having a strategy moving forward that makes it clear why FIFA, the Olympics, academic institutions, cultural institutions should all boycott Israel from all activities.
Okay, Mr. Pellet, let's talk about Indonesia, yeah, but later. I want to make headlines. You know that the Palestinian people have a right of resistance, meaning by weapon. And since in the beginning of Israel have one legitimation. This is by force, not voluntary. Okay. Do you think that if a certain country support Palestine fighter with weapon, it is allowed by the law, international law? And if yes, do you support it?
According to international law, people who are occupied, people who are colonized, people who are oppressed have the right to resist, including armed resistance. There's no question about that. The Palestinian struggle, whichever way it is manifested, whether with weapons or without weapons, is absolutely justified. There's no question about that. We saw just recently, brave young people, Palestinians in Jenin fighting.
Yes.
We've seen brave Palestinians fighting in Gaza. We've seen brave Palestinians fighting in many places. But of course, they cannot compete with the massive war machine. We do know that the Israeli military realized that they cannot put ground forces in Gaza, for example, because fighter to fighter, the Palestinians are much stronger, much better. And so since 2014, there have been no ground forces coming into Gaza because fighter to fighter, the Palestinians are superior. But the reality is that there's no competition here. There's no comparison here. The Palestinian, when you look at the young Palestinians who are fighting, they're wearing regular clothes, a t-shirt, they have one gun and a handful of bullets. And when the bullets are finished, it's finished. The Israeli war machine comes in. I think the last attack, they had thousands of forces. If you consider the fight, the forces that went in, the logistical forces, the medical forces, the air power, the hospitals that are ready to receive. Any soldier that has a smallest injury is evacuated by air immediately to the best hospital. A Palestinian who is injured, they won't even allow an ambulance to come and get them. They die from a simple wound because there's no ambulance, there's no access to proper medical care. So the problem is that there's no comparison. And so, but do they have a right to resist? Of course they have a right to resist. They have every right to resist. And we should support their resistance as well.
It's meaning, Mr. Miko, it is more justified for Israeli to make use superpower military to force or to make the Palestinian people to lay the weapon down, like you said before, because first it is the basic right of Palestinian people to resist with the weapon, but in the same time, because Israel is superpower, so it's meaningless. As far as Israel is in superpower, so they have a legitimation of occupation all of the land of Palestine. What do you think about it?
Well, they don't have legitimacy, but they do have the ability to do it, of course. And I've never been occupied. I have never been oppressed. I don't know what it's like, and it's not for me to tell people who are oppressed how and when they should resist. I think it makes perfect. I think it's absurd if we think that people will be suffering like the Palestinians, will be killed like the Palestinians are being killed, will be denied their rights. Their children are being killed. Their children are being arrested and tortured. Their homes are being destroyed, and that they will not pick up arms. It's absurd to expect that they will not pick up arms. Now, they have very few arms that they can utilize, and so of course the armed resistance is very small. But this is the reality. Of course, Israel is getting legitimacy because the entire world is deciding to look the other way. Israel says it's self-defense, which is of course an absolutely absurd argument. It's grotesque to say that Israel is defending itself against Palestinians. But look at the Western world. They're all nodding and saying, yes, Israel has a right to self-defense. Self-defense against what? Israel has been attacking and killing and expelling and denying water. You know, water, Israel controls all the water, all the water in the entire country. They allocate only 3% of the water to Palestinians.
Including Jordan.
Well, Jordan is another issue. They're denying water from Jordan too. That's true. They have an agreement with Jordan, which they have not adhered to. But for the people that Israel controls, they have the apartheid of the water distribution, where if you're an Israeli Jew, you have all the water you want, all the water in the world. There's never any restriction. If you're a Palestinian, sometimes, you know, the Palestinians sometimes live across the street from a Jewish community, from a Jewish settlement, literally really across the street. And they limit their water to 3% of the total water. So Israeli Jews get 97% of the water, even though they're the minority. And Palestinians, of course, get only 3%. So, I mean, it's on every level. The Palestinians are oppressed and denied rights. And of course, they have a right to exist in every way. Is that we are not there enough to support them. We're still arguing over whether or not they have a right exist, a right to fight, a right to self-determination. Where all of these things we shouldn't be arguing and discussing anymore. Those we should be taking for granted.
Okay, Mr. Peled, give me a happy news from you. Do you think that there is a weakness of inside of Israeli, because we know that the people of Israeli protest with the reform by moving Netanyahu, and there are many divided inside of Israeli. I ask you your comment.
Yeah, so it's funny that they call it a reform, but it's actually a reactionary policy. It's not a reform. What Netanyahu's government is doing is reactionary. It's not reforming anything. They are making it. They're adding more restrictions on people and more freedom for the government, which is very bad, of course. But what's interesting about Israel is that there's never been a cohesive society in Israel. Israel is not a cohesive society. Israel is made of, and the patches are held with glue, with tape, very cheap tape, and it's falling apart. It's been falling apart from the very beginning. Now, over my lifetime, there have been several times where major parts of Israeli society have been rebelling and protesting. First, these were the Jews who came, the community of Jews who came from Arab countries. They were protesting a great deal. Then there were the Ethiopian Jews that were brought from Africa. They were protesting. Nobody heard outside of Israel. Nobody heard at all. You never heard any international people speak about it. You certainly didn't hear American presidents talk about it. Nobody cared. It was an internal issue, and that's it. Now the people who are protesting are privileged. These are people who look like me. These are people who are mostly European. So now that they're protesting and they're talking about their rights, defending their rights, suddenly the whole world is taking interest. When white privileged people whose homes are not in jeopardy, their jobs are not in jeopardy, their lives is not in jeopardy, the other communities that had brown skin, by the way, darker skin, when they were protesting, nobody cared. Now that light-skinned people are protesting against the infringement of their rights, suddenly the entire world is watching. Now, what's true is this is a part of the population which are the pilots, the officers in the military, wealthy people who don't like Netanyahu. And I'm not saying the protest is not justified, but these are people who are running the apartheid state. Now, they are privileged. People like myself are privileged within the apartheid state, completely privileged. But they care nothing. You've never seen them once protesting about murdering people in Gaza. You've never seen them once protesting about political prisoners, Palestinian political prisoners. They're only protesting when it's their own privilege that's being is at risk. And again, the rest of the world suddenly has interest when white light-skinned people are fighting for their privilege. It's an incredible thing. But you're right, Israeli society is being torn apart. I think this this tape that has been, keeping Israeli society together is falling off, and Israeli society is ripping apart. Now, it would be good if we knew that there was an alternative coming up. But there is no alternative coming up. There is no Palestinian voice that is talking about taking over this void. And when you have a void politically and you have a void socially, the weakest people always suffer, and the violent racists always take power. So what is happening is Palestinians are being killed more, are being detained more and more of their rights are being denied them, and Israel is passing laws every single day to strengthen their own, this kind of Jewish superiority which they created in Israel. And if I may, I'll give you one example. They just passed a law yesterday or the day before that says that if a Jewish woman is raped by an Arab, or if a Jewish woman is raped by a Jew, the rapist gets punished based on whether they're an Arab or a Jew. An Arab gets a higher penalty than a Jew, the woman. This shows you the level of racism that is beyond even, it's unbelievable that people can express and say these things. An Arab today, God forbid, raping a Jewish woman is considered a bigger criminal than a Jewish man raping a Jewish woman. But I mean, do you understand? Can people understand just how deeply sick this racism is, and how deep it is within the state of Israel, within Israeli society?
Yes, Mr. Mikko Pellet, we know exactly, because we have been occupied for 350 years. We know that the Dutch have a special privilege. It is unjust rule, and we see the divided of Israel, the privilege of Israelis, like our past, of course, yeah. Okay, the people of Israel, I think, just to ask about their privilege. They never think about the basic right of Palestine. So this issue is more paradoxical between the democracy and occupation, whether in the government of Netanyahu and other side, the people of Palestine. But we can share your idea in another segment. So we close to this first segment. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pellet. We continue to another segment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.